family was assembled to dinner. My dress, I saw, struck Lord Orville with astonishment, and I was myself so much ashamed of appearing whimsical and unsteady, that I could not look up. "I understood," said Mrs. Beaumont, "that Miss Anville did not go out this evening." "Her intention in the morning," said Mrs. Selwyn, "was to stay at home; but there is a fascinating power in an assembly, which, upon second thoughts, is not to be resisted." "The assembly?" cried Lord Orville. "Are you then going to the assembly?" I made no answer, and we all took our places at table. It was not without difficulty that I contrived to give up my usual seat, but I was determined to adhere to the promise in my yesterday's letter, though I saw that Lord Orville seemed quite confounded at my visible endeavours to avoid him. After dinner, we all went into the drawing-room together, as there were no gentlemen to detain his Lordship, and then, before I could place myself out of his way, he said, "You are then really going to the assembly? May I ask if you shall dance?" "I believe not, my Lord." "If I did not fear," continued he, "that you would be tired of the same partner at 2 following assemblies, I would give up my letter writing till to-morrow evening, and solicit the honour of your hand." "If I do dance," cried I, in great confusion, "I believe I am engaged." "Engaged!" cried he, with earnestness. "May I ask to whom?" "To Sir Clement Willoughby, my Lord." He said nothing, but looked very little pleased, and did not address himself to me any more all the afternoon. Oh, Sir, thus situated, how comfortless were the feelings of your Evelina! Early in the evening, with his accustomed assiduity, Sir Clement came to conduct us to the assembly. He soon contrived to seat himself next me, and in a low voice paid me so many compliments, that I knew not which way to look. Lord Orville hardly spoke a word, and his countenance was grave and thoughtful, yet whenever I raised my eyes, his, I perceived, were directed towards me, though instantly, upon meeting mine, he looked another way. In a short time, Sir Clement, taking from his pocket a folded paper, said almost in a whisper, "Here, loveliest of women, you will see a faint, an unsuccessful attempt to paint the object of all my adoration. Yet, weak as are the lines for the purpose, I envy, beyond expression, the happy mortal who has dared make the effort." "I will look at them," said I, "some other time." For, conscious that I was observed by Lord Orville, I could not bear he should see me take a written paper so privately offered from Sir Clement. But Sir Clement is an impracticable man, and I never succeeded in any attempt to frustrate whatever he had planned. "No," said he, still in a whisper, "you must take them now, while Lady Louisa is away," for she and Mrs. Selwyn were gone up stairs to finish their dress, "as she must by no means see them." "Indeed," said I have no intention to show them." "But the only way," answered he, "to avoid suspicion, is to take them in her absence. I would have read them aloud myself, but that they are not proper to be seen by anybody in this house, yourself and Mrs. Selwyn excepted." Then again he presented me the paper, which I was now obliged to take, as I found declining it was vain. But I was sorry that this action should be seen, and the whispering remarked, though the purport of the conversation was left to conjecture. As I held it in my hand, Sir Clement teased me to look at it immediately, and told me the reason he would not produce the lines publicly was, that among the ladies who were mentioned and supposed to be rejected, was Lady Louisa Larpent. I am much concerned at this circumstance, as I cannot doubt but that it will render me more disagreeable to her than ever, if she should ever hear of it. I will now copy the verses, which Sir Clement would not let me rest till I had read. See last advance with bashful grace, downcast eye and blushing cheek, timid air and beauteous face, Anville, whom the Graces seek. Though every beauty is her own, and though her mind each virtue fills, Anville to her power unknown, artless strikes, unconscious kills. I am sure, my dear Sir, you will not wonder that a panegyric such as this should, in reading, give me the greatest confusion, and unfortunately, before I had finished it, the ladies returned. "What have you there, my dear?" said Mrs. Selwyn. "Nothing, Ma'am," said I, hastily folding and putting it in my pocket. "And has nothing," cried she, "the power of rouge?" I made no answer. A deep sigh, which escaped Lord Orville at that moment, reached my ears, and gave me sensations which I dare not mention. Lord Merton then handed Lady Louisa and Mrs. Beaumont to the latter's carriage. Mrs. Selwyn led the way to Sir Clement's, who handed me in after her. During the ride I did not once speak, but when I came to the assembly room, Sir Clement took care that I should not preserve my silence. He asked me immediately to dance. I begged him to excuse me, and seek some other partner; but, on the contrary, he told me, he was very glad I would sit still, as he had a million things to say to me. He then began to tell me how much he had suffered from my absence, how greatly he was alarmed when he heard I had left town, and how cruelly difficult he had found it to trace me, which, at last, he could only do by sacrificing another week to Captain Mirvan. "And Howard Grove," continued he, "which at my first visit I thought the most delightful spot upon earth, now appeared to me the most dismal; the face of the country altered; the walks which I had thought most pleasant were now most stupid; Lady Howard, who had appeared a cheerful and respectable old lady, now appeared in the common John Trot style of other aged dames; Mrs. Mirvan, whom I had esteemed as an amiable piece of still life, now became so insipid that I could hardly keep awake in her company; the daughter, too, whom I had regarded as a good-humoured, pretty sort of girl, now seemed too insignificant for notice; and as to the Captain, I had always thought him a booby, but now he appeared a savage." "Indeed, Sir Clement," cried I, angrily, "I will not hear you speak thus of my best friends." "I beg your pardon," said he, "but the contrast of my two visits was too striking not to be mentioned." He then asked what I thought of the verses. "Either," said I, "they are written ironically, or by some madman." Such a profusion of compliments ensued, that I was obliged to propose dancing in my own defence. When we stood up, "I intended," said he, "to have discovered the author by his looks, but I find you so much the general lodestone of attention, that my suspicions change their object every moment. Surely you must yourself have some knowledge of who he is?" I told him no. Yet, my dear Sir, I must own to you, I have no doubt but that Mr. Macartney must be the author. No one else would speak of me so partially; and, indeed, his poetical turn puts it, with me, beyond dispute. He asked me 1,000 questions concerning Lord Orville: how long he had been at Bristol, what time I had spent at Clifton, whether he rode out every morning, whether I ever trusted myself in a phaeton, and a multitude of other enquiries, all tending to discover if I was honoured with much of his Lordship's attention, and all made with his usual freedom and impetuosity. Fortunately, as I much wished to retire early, Lady Louisa makes a point of being the first who quit the rooms, and therefore we got home in very tolerable time. Lord Orville's reception of us was grave and cold. Far from distinguishing me as usual by particular civilities, Lady Louisa herself could not have seen me enter the room with more frigid unconcern, nor have more scrupulously avoided honouring me with any notice. But chiefly I was struck to see that he suffered Sir Clement, who stayed to supper, to sit between us, without any effort to prevent him, though till then he had seemed to be even tenacious of a seat next mine. This little circumstance affected me more than I can express, yet I endeavoured to rejoice at it, since neglect and indifference from him may be my best friends. But, alas, so suddenly, so abruptly, to forfeit his attention, to lose his friendship! Oh, Sir, these thoughts pierced my soul. Scarce could I keep my seat, for not all my efforts could restrain the tears from trickling down my cheeks. However, as Lord Orville saw them not, for Sir Clement's head was constantly between us, I tried to collect my spirits, and succeeded so far as to keep my place with decency till Sir Clement took leave; and then, not daring to trust my eyes to meet those of Lord Orville, I retired. I have been writing ever since, for certain that I could not sleep, I would not go to bed. Tell me, my dearest Sir, if you possibly can,